Hi everyone, welcome to Poisonous People. We're continuing our series on diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder. And in this video, we're going to be talking all about empathy. Specifically, we're going to answer once and for all the question, can a narcissist have empathy? The answer is absolutely yes. And I'm going to show you 3 ways that the DSM-5 implies that they can indeed have empathy. And then the second thing I'm going to cover in this video are the 2 ways that I measure for a lack of empathy in a particular client. So before we get into the DSM-5, I'm going to share with you the first proof that demonstrates that narcissists can have empathy. And that is that in order to be diagnosed with NPD, you have to have a minimum of 5 of the 9 criteria for NPD, and that can be any 5. And I said the exact same thing about the previous video when I talked about exploitation. It's possible to have 5 of the criteria for NPD and not meet the criterion for exploitation, which means you could be a narcissist and not be abusive. Now, the same thing applies here with empathy. It's possible for you to have 5 of the other criteria and still have empathy, because empathy is not one of the 5 that you check off. So that is the first way that we know that it is indeed possible for a person with a clinical diagnosis of NPD to have empathy. Now, for the other 2 proofs, we're going to have to look directly at the DSM. So let's take a look now at what it says. So we're back on the top of page 670. This is the DSM-5, and empathy is listed under number 7 here. And it says, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. So the first thing I want to highlight here is that the first 2 words that we see are the words lacks empathy. And it's very important to realize that it says lack, which implies that the narcissist can have empathy. There's just a deficit of empathy. There's not enough. So it's not like they have 0 empathy. They do have a little bit. And the way that I like to illustrate this is with gasoline in your car. If you have a quarter tank of gasoline or less, you're lacking gasoline. I mean, it's not like you don't have any gas. Your car is not going to just stall on the road. You do have enough to get to the local grocery store or maybe the post office and back home. But if you're thinking of driving out of state or going on an extended road trip, that's not going to happen because you don't have enough gasoline in your car. So the idea of empathy is that people with more empathy, we have full gas tanks, whereas a narcissist only has a little bit of gas in their tank, and it's not going to take them very far. So I'm going to come back to that illustration later in the video when I explain how I personally assess for lack of empathy. But before we do that, let's look at our 3rd proof from the DSM that would imply that narcissists do have empathy. And so once again, it says lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. So the word they specifically use there is unwilling. If the narcissist was unable to feel any kind of empathy, it would say that. It would say unable to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. But that's not what it says. It says unwilling, which would imply that the narcissist does indeed have empathy. They're just not willing to show it or share it with you. So now that we've got that covered, I'd like to talk a little bit about how I personally assess for an individual's lack of empathy. Now, I think it's common for most of us to look to the big things in life. somebody's grandma died, or somebody ended up in the hospital, or they're very, very ill. And we tend to look at these big life events, and if somebody doesn't really show a lot of empathy, right away we think to ourselves, oh my God, what's wrong with that person? I'm in the hospital, or my grandma just died, and they don't even care. I personally think this is a lousy measuring stick for empathy, because these are major life events and they actually require more empathy. Now, you would think they would require less because it's such a big event that surely it would push you into some sort of emotional response. But look at it from a different angle. We all have been through some difficult trials in our lives, and we can probably all attest that even our best, most loyal friends were there for us in the beginning. But as time rolled on, our friends started to lose patience. Maybe we went through a terrible breakup and people were supportive in the beginning, but over time they started falling off. That's because the more intense the life experience, it actually requires more stamina or more gasoline, if you will. So if we were to use a different analogy, if we were to say, I want to see how weak somebody is, and then we said, could you lift this car? That wouldn't be a fair test because it takes an incredible amount of strength to lift a car. Nobody can lift a car, in fact. So if we really want to know if somebody is weak, we would start by giving them a little bit of weight. We would give them a 5-pound dumbbell, and if they couldn't even lift the 5-pound dumbbell, then we know for sure that this is a weakling. So it's the same thing with empathy. We don't want to look at the big major catastrophes and the big trials in life to determine if somebody lacks empathy, because eventually we're all going to run out of gas with a big life event. We are going to turn our attention instead to the little things. So we're looking at random acts of kindness, or even better, common courtesy. People who have a healthy amount of empathy are automatically compelled to show common courtesy to others. They may hold a door open as they're leaving the post office. They may see you struggling with a bunch of packages, and when you drop an item, they will automatically be compelled to bend down and pick up that item and hand it to you. We are automatically placing ourselves in that other person's shoes. We know how we would feel if we were in those little situations, and we know how we would like to be treated by others. We automatically know it's respectful and polite to show up at 9 a.m. if we agreed to meet at 9 a.m. And if we're running late, we think about that other person and we think about how would they feel if I'm running 15 minutes late and they don't hear from me. So we extend the courtesy of sending them a text message. This is what I look for when I look for lack of empathy. I'm always going to look at whether or not the person is failing to demonstrate basic common courtesy, because that would imply that their gas tank is almost empty. They just don't even have enough strength to lift the 5-pound dumbbell. The second thing that I'm going to be looking for is a lack of insight. Narcissists have terrible, terrible insight. That is true of pretty much every personality disorder, especially with cluster B. But with NPD, the lack of insight is directly tied to the lack of empathy. And the reason is that the narcissist, again, is not able to put themselves in another person's shoes. So the narcissist will get some idea for some harebrained scheme, or they may say something or do something, and the narcissist thinks it's a really good idea. That's why they do it, because image is everything. So if they thought it was a bad idea, or if they thought it would make them look bad, they wouldn't do it. But they do it thinking it makes them look good, and they have absolutely no clue that it actually makes them look bad. I've heard narcissists make really stupid comments. I've seen narcissists do really stupid things. And I've even seen people laughing at the narcissist. And the narcissist misinterpreted the laughter almost as a type of admiration. The narcissist assumed that everybody's laughing at how clever I am. Like they can't believe how smart and clever and classy I look. But really, people are laughing because they cannot believe how rude and inappropriate the behavior is. This lack of insight demonstrates a lack of empathy because they're not putting themselves in other people's shoes. Instead, they're putting their shoes on everyone else and just assuming everyone else sees the world the way they do. So these are the two ways that I assess for empathy, and I hope this video has also helped you to see how a narcissist can, in fact, have empathy. I'm Jen Guerriero, and this is Poisonous People. Thanks for watching.